The entire contents of this podcast and website are based upon the opinions of Tammy Garcia and her guests, unless otherwise noted. The information on this podcast is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional and is not intended as medical advice. It is intended as a sharing of knowledge and information from the research and experience of Tammy Garcia and her guests. This is the Naturally Inspired Podcast, coming to you from our 1890 homestead in Johnstown, Colorado. I'm Tammy, and I want to thank you for joining us. Let's get started and help people feel good so they can do what they love for longer. Today on the Naturally Inspired Podcast, we have Nicole Eckman joining us. Nicole has been a registered dietitian nutritionist since 2001. She has a bachelor's degree in human nutrition. She completed her dietetic internship through the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. She also has a certificate of training in integrative functional medical nutrition therapy. Welcome, Nicole, to the Naturally Inspired Podcast. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a born and raised Jersey girl. I was born in...
Another Jersey girl. No way.
They're everywhere. You know why they're everywhere? Because they don't stay there. They all leave. No,
I think my last two guests have been from that area.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many people are from New Jersey out here in Colorado. But I was born and raised in New Jersey, right near the beach. And so most of our family is still back there. And I grew up with two brothers and a sister, and
Nice.
grew up very, going to Catholic school, very Irish Catholic my whole life. So
Yeah.
A lot has changed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Four kids in your family?
Yeah. An older sister and then two younger brothers. Yeah.
Nice. And how was that growing up? Did you guys live in a regular subdivision house, or where were you living at that time? Just close to the ocean?
In a neighborhood, but we had, I think we lived on a little over an acre, if I recall. That's about what it was. We had a lot of woods behind us too, though.
Okay.
So, we did grow up playing in the woods a lot, lots of outdoor activity. It's just kind of, I think that was standard at those times.
Right. And did your family have an interest in natural health?
My mom always did. My mom was, when we were sick, you would go to supplements, and we ate a really pretty clean diet. And my sister and I always laughed because we were definitely more restricted than the younger ones. There's a gap between my sister and I and the two younger boys, and they were much more liberal as far as letting them eat things like junk cereal and stuff like that.
Right.
I never got any of that. But
Right.
no, we did grow up eating that was very normal in my house. And my grandmother, my mom's mother, was also very into natural health as well as her siblings. So it was pretty much a normal go-to in my house to get, supplements when you were sick versus going to the doctor immediately, or getting, antibiotics or things like that. Not that we never had them, but it was definitely a, kind of the first line of defense. So
Right.
I learned that pretty young and thought that
That's
was
great.
what everybody did, really.
It really wasn't. A lot of people didn't take that route. In fact, I think it's pretty common that most people ran to the doctor right away for antibiotics or whatever. But so you're lucky to
and
grow
those
up
were
like
the
that.
years where it was, antibiotics were grossly overprescribed. Not that they're not anymore, but I think they're at least aware now
Right.
of the overprescribing. And so we did, you did get them for a virus versus bacteria then, more so than you probably do now. But
Right. I think they wanted to cover their bases back then.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, if it's a virus or maybe it's bacterial, we'll just cover it.
Right. Why not? It's not going to hurt.
Right.
But that's not the case. So
Right. So is that kind of how you started on your path to natural health then, or how did you get into being a dietitian?
Well, so I will give you a little background on that. So my mom had breast cancer at a pretty young age, in her mid 30s, I guess she was. And she did use a lot of natural health for that as well. And
Oh,
so I,
wow.
again, exposed to that as more of a teenager, as far as using that as a treatment. She was also treated conventionally as well. But when I went to college, and my mom did pass away, unfortunately, but she lived much longer than she was supposed to, as far as what her prognosis was.
Right.
And when I went to college, which I came out here to CSU, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I had just lost my mom less than a year before, and I just was pretty kind of lost and confused. And I decided, when I was choosing my classes, just to kind of not declare a major. And then when I took 2 nutrition classes throughout my freshman year, it was sort of an obvious choice. I was like, well, this is the only thing that really speaks to me right now, that I
Right.
can relate to, that makes me feel at home and comfortable, as far as thinking I could, and I think I always felt like I was going to be in the medical field of some sort. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely tossed around being a physician at certain points, was pretty serious about it, actually, or a physician's assistant. But then I started doing a couple nutrition classes, really liked them. And honestly, to be totally honest, I tell this to interns all the time, or CSU nutrition students. I had no idea what the end result of being a nutrition student really was going to look like. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a registered dietitian.
Right.
As you go through the program, they educate you on your options. And being a registered dietitian is kind of the responsible, clear path, I guess. But I
Right.
didn't really even know what that meant, to be honest with you. I just thought, all right, well, I'll apply to the internships. And the internships are very limited, and there's not nearly enough for students, and they're very competitive. So I
Oh, interesting.
thought, well, I don't even know if I'll get one, and
Right.
now it's amazing what students go through to get one. It's even more competitive. So I did get one, and I applied to University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, which is, of course, about 45 minutes from where I grew up. So
Right.
I figured I'd been gone for 6 years. I'd go back there and give it a try and do my graduate program. And, long story short, that's where I, ended up going through the internship program, which is a 9-month intensive program where you do rotations in different areas of and nutrition. So you follow dietitians around, obviously, and you do everything from parenteral and enteral nutrition, which is an IV nutrition, to food service, to
Oh, wow.
you
Really
know
run the spectrum then.
yeah, they try to
Yeah.
get you exposed to everything so you can decide what you like, and
Right.
community nutrition, and private practice. And so
Wow.
that's kind of the route I went. And then as soon as I was, in school, I realized this is not going to be the way I want to practice. I knew that right away.
Okay.
Immediately, really before I even started the internship, because you kind of know what you're expecting. But I have to say, there is a respect that comes with having the registered dietitian title.
For sure.
Every job I ever got, my first, before starting my own practice, was because I was an RD. So it's
Right.
always something that I felt was a good decision.
Right. But
Um,
you've continued your educations after you finished your degree. You kind of shifted again and headed towards more functional
yeah,
nutrition, right?
functional and integrative nutrition
Yeah.
is really my passion, and that's what I practice and have been for about 12 years consistently. I did a few trainings in, I've got a certification for the integrative and functional medical nutrition therapy training, which is the first one for dietitians. Other people can take it as well, other
Hmm.
practitioners, but it's mostly dietitians that have that training. And that I did all 4 levels of that. And then I've done, just countless hours of, functional and integrative nutrition, because I love it. It's interesting, and I'm
Right.
passionate about it, and it's fun, and it's evolving, and people are excited about it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's evolving on a pretty mass scale. Actually, I think people are really waking up to and figuring out that what we're putting in our bodies is manifesting disease or manifesting feeling good.
It's amazing. Yeah. Food is amazing. It's magical, really. When you feed your body the right things, it's nothing short of miraculous, the things it can do.
Yeah. That's great. I can't wait to learn more about that
Mm-hmm.
from you. So can you tell us the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist? Is there a
Yeah,
difference?
that could be, yeah, for sure. That could be a really long answer, but I'll give you the shortest one. So, a registered dietitian follows a 4-year bachelor's degree in nutrition.
Okay.
Mine was human nutrition and dietetics, was the bachelor's degree program that I graduated from at CSU, and they have a really good program there, actually. And then you do the dietetic internship, which is anywhere from 8 to 12 months, I believe. Mine was 9 months, and so during that time, you're being exposed to multiple different um, settings for healthcare and how a
Mm-hmm.
dietitian could be involved in working in those.
Right.
So, and of course, you're learning a lot of science and a lot of medicine and tons of chemistry and all these kinds of you know
So it's a little more in depth than just being a nutritionist.
Yeah, I mean, nutritionists could be lots of things too. I mean, so there are nutritionists who have other degrees. Like, for example, you could be a nurse and then become a nutritionist. You just have to watch with nutritionists because, not that they wouldn't be knowledgeable, but they could have very little training and they could be mostly self-taught, which is, you really want to make sure someone's got a background in education and understanding some of the foundations. And that's one thing I always hold in very massive gratitude is, even though there was a lot of things about my training I didn't love,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I got a really, really good depth in science and kind of the underlying reasons, anatomy, physiology, all that good stuff, chemistry, organic chemistry. You understand things on a different level when you've
Right.
gone through those trainings. So a lot of, you could call yourself a nutritionist after taking, a weekend course. There are
Right.
things like that out there. So there's a huge spectrum in what a nutritionist would be. And there's, just look into who's got what and how they've learned what they know.
Right. So tell me, what type of patients do you see?
I
Why
see,
would someone come to you, I guess? Why do they
yeah, I
come to
see
you?
a pretty wide variety of patients, but I have definitely a reputation for digestive disorders. So that's
Yeah.
probably the thing that I see people come to me the most for. I would say well over half my patients have digestive issues of some sort, and probably another half of the remaining have digestive issues that they didn't realize they had until they came to me.
Right.
So,
And I definitely want to get into this whole gut health thing with you for
yeah,
sure,
yeah,
because there's just so much information about gut health and how it can affect us. And I think it affects people in different ways too.
yeah,
So it's not
absolutely.
something we can just paint with a brush. If you have a digestive disorder
Hmm.
or having gut issues, it can
Sure.
manifest in many different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, we see a lot of manifestations of digestive imbalances that are not, you know, in the torso only, in the
Right.
abdominal
Right.
area only. So, that
Like
can
with
be
headaches.
yeah. Yeah. Brain fog, depression, anxiety, mood issues, sleep issues, inflammation in the body, joint pain. I mean, you name it, it could be the gut, as the root cause of it. Lots and lots of skin issues, hormonal imbalances, because a lot of hormones are conjugated in the gut and metabolized in the gut. So there's a lot of different trickle down effects that you could see, the relationship be connected. And so sometimes when people come to me for just say hormone imbalance and
Yeah.
I have these terrible periods or hormone symptoms and I need to lose weight and I can't lose it, we end up getting to the gut because we didn't, that's not what they were specifically coming in for. But then as we dig through the layers, we find out that there is really some significant imbalance. Not everybody, but a lot of people for sure.
Wow, that's fascinating when that wasn't their primary concern. So you can
Right,
have gut issues without the traditional gut problems or
right,
symptoms like
right,
gas or
exactly.
bloating or, digestive issues.
Right. So you have the classic, I'm coming in because every time I eat, I get bloated, I have
Right.
diarrhea, I have constipation, I have indigestion or reflux, I have stomach aches, you hear the gamut. And then you have the sort of more indirect, which is things like, I ask, my intake form is 12 pages long. So,
Yeah.
so I have a lot of,
That's one thing I really notice with functional medicine
yeah,
practitioners. If you go to a regular doctor, it's usually maybe, 2 pages, maybe 3 with HIPAA and all of that. But you go to a
right.
functional medicine doctor and you're going to need to be there for a while.
Right. Yeah, for sure. The intake that we are looking for is pretty in depth because we're looking for a web. We're looking for connections to
Hmm.
those symptoms and those relationships. And we're playing detective, so we're trying to piece
Absolutely.
together
That's what
the,
health is. It's really detective work.
right. It's a huge web, and so
Yeah.
a lot of times I'll tell people, um, you know, I know it feels like you have all of these different things going on and you have all of these, your periods are irregular, you've gained a bunch of weight, your stomach hurts after you eat, you get a lot of headaches, but really it's all connected. It's not just five individual symptoms that all need to be addressed separately, which, a lot of times conventional medicine is taking that approach. It's like you go to this doctor for this symptom, this doctor for this symptom, et cetera. And I
Right.
think we have to look at the person, in more of a big whole picture to see what the web is leading to, how it's spreading out and causing these connections and correlations between symptoms.
Right. So, can you describe to our listeners what is the gut biome? What is gut health? What are we looking for to have a healthy gut?
Well, the gut microbiome is basically the ecosystem that lives within our digestive tract.
Right.
We have bacteria all over our body, but within your gut, the average adult has about 4.5 pounds of bacteria,
Wow.
trillions and trillions of cells worth of bacteria. So you actually have more bacteria in your gut in your body than you do have cells, which is hard to believe.
Right.
So that little ecosystem is supposed to be living in balance. So you have good guys and bad guys within that ecosystem, and they need to be balanced. If you
Right.
have too many bad guys, you're going to have symptoms. If you have too little overall, you're going to have symptoms. And even too many of the good guys can cause symptoms.
Right.
So just like in an ecosystem, you couldn't have too many predators and, not enough of a certain other type of species. They all really balance each other out. So the gut microbiome has become pretty talked about lately. And
Yeah, it's definitely mainstream.
yeah, it's getting there, and it
Yeah.
plays a really, really important role in our health. It's not just digestion, but your immune system is partially regulated by the gut microbiome. Your blood sugar, your hormone balance, your body's ability to make nutrients. That good bacteria produces B vitamins, as an example. So there's
Oh,
just a
wow,
lot
that's
of
interesting. So you could be
responsibilities.
vitamin deficient if you have an upset gut biome.
In fact, it's pretty uncommon to not be
Right.
missing at least some nutrients. Now, of course, minerals are one of the biggest because, one, our soil's already depleted, and
Right.
two, um, we don't absorb them as well when we don't have an optimized gut.
Right.
So mineral depletion is probably one of the top things that I see, as far as not having the minerals. Zinc, magnesium, the zinc copper ratio is a big one. That's a whole web talk in itself.
Right.
The trace minerals, manganese, and all the different nutrients that you would just take for granted. Like, most people aren't
Mhm.
supplementing with these. I mean, some people say, oh, when I'm sick, I'll supplement with zinc, for example, but and lots of people use magnesium, but there's just a lot of other minerals that you might be missing
Right.
because our soil's depleted and we're not getting enough variety in our food.
Right. And what are some symptoms off the top of your head of being mineral deficient?
Mineral deficiency, you would see, anything from um, sleep disturbances to muscle aches and pains. So a lot of these minerals play a role in the relationship between smooth muscle contraction and tendons and control of all that. Fatigue, chronic fatigue. Someone who's dehydrated could have chronic fatigue. Like, sodium itself is a huge mineral connected to fatigue. Um,
Muscle twitching?
I said sleep, I believe. Obviously, we can see things that also relate to mood significantly: hair loss, brittle nails. I mean, there's just tons and tons of things you could see.
Wow.
Those are some
That
of the things I see all the time. But
right. That's really interesting.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of people talking about gut. We've established that, and we've established what the gut biome does and how it's important for absorption and whatnot. Um, so what's causing this gut crisis, so to speak?
The million
What is,
dollar question, right? Yeah.
yeah, like what, I
Yeah.
don't know that I saw these many issues. Of course, maybe I wasn't as aware, but back in the 80s, I don't think I saw as many people suffering from issues that I think can be related to the gut.
Well, I don't think they existed either. I think as much as they do now, I think that we have a couple things. I mean, our food supply is garbage. I mean, we just don't have the quality that we should and that we deserve.
Right.
We also, we have this whole glyphosate piece that is just contaminating our food.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because it's really unavoidable to some degree. Even when you eat organic and GMO, you're still getting exposed to some of that, even in your environment.
Yeah. I was just speaking with a functional
You live in
medicine practitioner who attended a conference over the weekend and mentioned that they're actually finding glyphosate in our tissue now. So it's not.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're finding it in newborn babies. I mean, it's awful. The amount of chemicals they're finding in newborn babies is just scary. That haven't even been out and exposed to the world yet. But of course, they're sharing blood supply with their mother. So
Right.
it's really, you get super depressed about it and just feel like, okay, well, I guess I'm just screwed, and the world's toxic, and I'm just going to be sick. But
Right.
I don't really look at it that way. I think it's awareness. We do the best that we can. I'm a huge, huge believer in moderation and keeping your stress down about what you're exposed to, including your food. Like if you're going to eat something that you're choosing to eat, instead of taking a bite of that with all the fear and angst that you could possibly have,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just as toxic to you as possibly the food itself. So
Right.
why don't you go into that with some enjoyment? If you're nervous about every single thing you put in your mouth, I think that there's a toxicity level there too. So I think that,
And you can get to that place, pretty quickly because there is so much evidence and things to read and whatnot. And so if you're really trying to micromanage every little thing you do all the time, I think it could turn into something that brings on a lot of anxiety.
Sure. Yeah. Especially for people that are unwell. They are really living in fear of a lot of food and a lot of toxins in the environment and things that they're exposed to. And it's difficult. And I talk to those patients a lot about trying to be at peace with, cleaning up your diet, doing the best that you possibly can, and then not having so much fear around what you consume, because
Right.
it's going to, food made with love versus food made with anger is going to taste different. So
Right.
I think you want to really think about that when you're putting food into your body and supplements into your body. When patients are terrified of what a supplement's going to do to them, if they aren't trusting, if they're like, I wonder if I should be taking this, or maybe this is going to make me sick, or
Right.
maybe you shouldn't be taking it then. Get to a place where you feel trust, and then maybe consider revisiting it. But I do think that, the toxic burden in our environment is higher than it's ever been. And
Right.
therefore our bodies are taxed. And so I think we need to be more careful about supporting our detox pathways, supporting our liver,
Yeah.
supporting our stress response. We are stressed to the max, and we work, because we multitask to the nth degree.
Right.
And it's, it really is a detriment to a lot of people, to most of us, really. I mean, I think everyone at some point gets hit by it, but,
Yeah. So how do we support those pathways?
so, your detox pathways, there's a lot of natural ways to do that. Obviously, the first choice is always decreasing your exposure as much as possible. So what do you have control over? What's in your home?
Right.
So clean food, clean body products, clean makeup products, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Clean up your bathrooms, clean up your kitchens.
Yeah.
There's tons of information online. I love the environmental working group, ewg.org. They have lots of great resources that are free. And they have that. Have you heard of that Clean 15? The Dirty Dozen.
Yes.
Clean 15
Dirty. Yes.
law. So
Yeah.
it's like, it used to
But
just be
tell our
the
listeners about that, because I have not covered that on the program yet.
Yeah, so the Clean 15 Dirty Dozen is basically the cleanest, or let's start with the Dirty Dozen. It's the 12 most pesticide-ridden fruits and vegetables.
Hmm.
So mostly, just to summarize it, it's things with softer skin. So like strawberries are going to have a higher toxic pesticide level than an orange because they don't have a protective skin like the orange does.
Right.
So, and same thing with like a banana, that would be more protected than, blueberries would be,
Right.
or a peach. So you look on there, ewg.org, or you can just Google, Clean 15 Dirty Dozen. And then it also tells you the cleanest fruits and vegetables. And there's 15 of those. And it helps you make some choices on, one, what are you going to spend your organic budget on?
Yeah.
If you really like berries, you should be trying to get them organic. And if they're
Yes.
too expensive, at certain times, then freeze them,
Right. Or
um,
buy frozen.
right. Or buy them already frozen because that's cheaper
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
So it gives you little tips on how to do that. So cleaning up our direct environment is the first way. And then I think another way is to really do some liver support. And obviously I can't give general blanket recommendations without knowing anything about people, but there's a lot of different supplements that support that. There's a lot of foods that support detox pathways, like cruciferous vegetables. That
Right.
includes cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, chard. Those are all, they have compounds in them that help clear those detox pathways and move things along a little more efficiently. And then another really good one is sweating. If you can
Yeah.
sweat, you are dumping toxins more efficiently than not sweating.
Yeah.
So sure, an infrared sauna would be the best way to do that. But you
Yeah.
can
I
also
actually have an infrared and I love it.
yeah. Yeah. And I had one for quite a while. And then I sold mine because I started doing hot yoga classes where they have infrared.
Hmm.
And I
Oh,
do
wow. That's cool.
3 to 4 times a week. So I decided that I didn't really need it. I wasn't using it as much as I had
Yeah.
been. And not everybody needs to buy one, but honestly, they're not as expensive as you'd think. And
Right. They're
if you
not.
use it, it's certainly cheaper than going and using one somewhere
Yeah.
else.
And how long do you recommend someone sit in the sauna, and for how many times a week to get maximum benefit?
Well, I mean, I think it depends what's going on. If someone is sick and they're very toxic, you want to be really, really careful about going too fast. You could feel really badly by opening up those detox pathways and dumping. So most of my clients, I would tell them, start really slow just to see how you feel,
Uh-huh.
maybe 10 minutes. And you might not
Okay.
even really be sweating that much, but just see how you feel. I'm a big fan of baby steps.
Right. You
Why
can
rush
always
and
pull it
suffer
back a little.
slowly? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always pull it back.
Yeah.
Yeah. But multiple days a week would be the recommendation. And then, 3, 4 days a week at least. And then, if you're in there for an hour, maybe you do it, 3 days a week or 2 days a week. But, the idea is just to kind of build up your time. You
Right.
could do it every day though, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if you have the time, then you
Yeah.
should do it every day, because it's actually very invigorating.
It is. That's
You
what most
feel
people
great.
will find. And make sure you rehydrate after, because of course
Yes.
that's one of probably the big things that people forget to do is drink enough. You don't realize how much water you lose.
Right.
Mhm.
Backing up a little bit, when you're talking about the vegetables, do you recommend people eating vegetables raw, cooked, and how do you feel about juicing?
Well, generally speaking, I love the raw, at least half of your vegetables being raw. Because I have a practice with a lot of digestive disorders, a lot of people can't tolerate raw. So if raw doesn't work for you, it hurts your stomach, it makes you feel bloated or distended or achy, then just cook your vegetables. But I think the big thing is that people overcook them.
Yeah.
So cook lightly, lightly steam to break down that fibrous wall, and that's going to be beneficial enough to get you the benefits of the nutrients in the vegetables, but without killing it.
Yeah. It shouldn't fall apart when you pick it up.
Right. And it shouldn't be like bright green to like a army green. You don't want to kill all the color. Like broccoli, you cook it too long, it's going to turn a very kind of not so pretty green. It's going to be super wilted, and
Right. It
you're
should be
losing
pretty
some of that.
vibrant green, and then
Yes.
that's good enough.
Yes. If it's a green vegetable, keep it green.
Right.
Yeah. Keep it vibrant.
Okay. That sounds like good advice. These foods aren't necessarily readily available on the go anymore. And so we're dealing with that kind of in society as a whole, is just kind of how convenient it is to not eat healthy.
Yeah.
So how are you seeing this affect our young people?
Yeah. Our poor children. I just think that they don't even realize,
What would you say, do you think, like
you
a
know, what,
typical diet is of just an adolescent kid at this point? Because I know I've got a 16-year-old boy and I've got a 14-year-old girl, and I'm around their friends and other kids their age, and sometimes I'm kind of shocked at what people are eating on a regular basis.
yeah,
Do you see that?
yeah, for sure. I have a fairly savvy, the patients that I attract tend to be fairly savvy. Not to say they have nothing to learn, but they usually are somewhat aware.
Right.
But I also have an 11 and a 14-year-old, and I hear and see what those kids eat, and I've seen at school and stuff. So I think probably one of the biggest things is the sugary drinks. Kids drink those without even thinking twice about it. I think that, I did a class last week on nutrition for girls. And during that class, we talked about sugar and sugar content and what really they should be around, where they should be kind of making sure they're not going too far over. And
Right.
what does that look like? And one of the things I put up on the screen was, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on whole grain bread, a juice box, and it was 2 cookies and an applesauce cup. And I said, how many of you will see lunches like this around the lunchroom? So these girls
Yeah.
were 6th to 9th grade, and every single kid raised their hand.
Yeah.
And I said, how many grams of sugar do you think would be in this meal? And this is after I told them, about how many grams they should be consuming.
Yeah.
And they all had their guesses. The answer was 76 grams of sugar.
Holy.
Now, of course, you're talking
Wow.
about Jif peanut butter,
Yeah.
a good amount of jelly on that. And the bread that this particular example was using did have 4 grams of sugar per slice.
Yeah.
The cookies were 11 grams each. The applesauce had added sugar. So what we
What's the recommended amount for the day?
yeah, so under 25
Yeah.
grams or less, is what we want our kids to be at. And the average kid is, the average American, I should say, because I don't know if this is just children, but the average American is consuming over 100 grams a day. And a lot of them don't realize it. Now, of course, the people that drink soda and sweetened drinks, they know, I'm getting 35 grams every time I have one of these drinks, and I have 2 or 3 a day. But this example of the lunch, which appears to be fairly healthy,
Yeah. Not so obvious.
is kind of a sneaky one.
Yeah.
So what we talked about was, how do you modify that meal to make it work better?
Right.
Checking the labels. Get bread without sugar. That's 8
Right.
right there. It's possible,
Yes.
You want to keep your cookies? Okay, then have a turkey sandwich with 1 piece of bread instead of 2, and have a real apple instead of the applesauce. Those kinds of things.
So, I
So
love that. I love that you're giving such practical advice there.
yeah, it has to be practical. They glaze over. You can't lecture to them. You can't lecture to them. So,
Right.
but that's the reality, is they don't even realize. And of course, who's packing the lunches? Some parents don't realize either.
Yeah. Oh, I think a lot of parents don't realize, especially like even when it comes to like fruit juice, that's a lot of sugar they're taking in one thing. And cereals is another big thing I think people don't realize.
Right.
There's a lot of hidden sugar
to get started in the day. And, of course, these high sugar intakes and high carb intakes are setting these kids off on, a blood sugar roller coaster for the day.
Exactly.
And so then we're expecting them to focus and sit still and pay attention. And this is where we get a lot of, I get a lot of disconnect in like this. How is this child supposed to sit still? I wouldn't sit still if I ate this.
Right.
I'd be, I feel off and fidgety,
Yeah.
or maybe sleepy, So
Yeah.
I think we don't realize sometimes how much their intake impacts their behavior.
Right. And how do you think that relates to diagnoses like ADHD and ADD?
I think it's pretty significant. I mean, I think there's places in town now in Fort Collins, at least, that are looking at diet and, those diagnoses, which is excellent, and nutrition, I should say, and those diagnoses, supplements and nutrients to bring in plus their food. I talk about it all the time with patients, and, they're parents about their kids, and there's so often a disconnect. But I think you got to look there first. I
Yeah,
mean,
I was just going to say that.
yeah, I mean, iron deficiency alone can manifest as hyperactivity,
Oh,
and most
really?
people think iron deficiency is fatigue only.
Yeah.
For some of us it is, but not necessarily for little kids. You can see hyperactivity with iron deficiency, and so that's something. Why are they not absorbing iron? Is the question. Their gut's
Hmm.
not working the way it should.
Right. Right. And so when we talk about processed foods, like packaged meals and stuff, I think a lot of people are using those too. And
Mhm.
how is those kinds of foods affecting and the sugar content, both of those things, how are they affecting the gut biome?
Well, I mean, sugar itself is very inflammatory. So we know it's inflammatory. It triggers cravings. And then of course that sets you off in a whole other cycle. Um, these processed foods are not, I mean, they're not real food. It's frankenfood. I mean, when you don't
Yeah.
know there's 9 ingredients on a list and 6 of them are things you can barely pronounce, we've got a problem.
Yeah.
I speak to a first grade class here in town at one of the local schools that I've done about 5 years now. And they have a garden, and so they grow food, and then I come in and talk to them about real food versus fake food. And
Oh,
I
that's
always have
great.
one of the kids come up and read the labels, and of course I pick like the worst thing I can find in the shelf.
Right.
And every time there's a kid goes, "Oh, I love those." As if
Right.
they're eating it at home. Um,
Yeah.
and it's so funny when these little, these kids are just learning to read, but to see them try to read,
Yeah.
monos, these long hyphenated words, and then
Right.
they look at me and they go, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Good question." And we teach them at a young age how to avoid ingredients that, one, are not food, but two, are actually can be harmful if you're eating them all the time. And so we
Right.
talk about sometimes foods and everyday foods. And I think it's like that's the only answer, is starting young and starting at
Right.
home.
Right.
They definitely affect the microbiome. They disrupt the absorption of nutrients. They cause inflammation in the gut. I mean, there's science to prove it. We know it. We
Hmm.
just have to get clear on what is acceptable in our food. In this country, we have a very, very long list. Don't quote me, but it's something like the FDA has something along the lines of 30 banned foods in our ingredients list. And
Uh-huh.
it's over 300.
Yes. And that's quite a hot topic right now because I'm from Canada actually, and I grew up in Canada, and when I moved to the United States, I definitely tasted a difference in the foods.
Mm-hmm.
And come to find out it's because there's different ingredients
Yeah,
that like red dye number 40 is banned in Canada and
exactly.
in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and it's perfectly fine here.
Mm-hmm.
Same
Mm-hmm.
product,
I know. I
the
know.
same
But how
product.
could they say it's toxic for those people and not toxic for us?
Yeah,
And it's hard to swallow that because
it
we think
is.
they're, supposed to be protecting us. So it's a challenging realization to kind of come to when you say, well, if it's in our food, it's got to be safe. I mean,
Yeah.
people who don't have the education about nutrition would say that. Um, it's just not true. I mean, it's
Right.
just not
And
safe.
long term too. I mean, you can eat one bowl of something that has that in it, say one time and have no effect. But if you're eating
Yeah.
that every day for
Yeah.
many years over time,
Mhm.
to say it's going to have no effect is, I just can't believe that's true.
Yeah. Well, and remember too, the other thing about especially sugar is it's empty calories. So it's filling people
Hmm.
up on empty calories, and you need a lot of it to fill you up.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you eat some quality protein, some good fat, and a complex carbohydrate, you're going to get a completely different response in those 300 calories versus the 300 calories of, a corn syrup based cookie or sweetener
Right.
or juice or whatever it might be. So calories in, calories out really doesn't apply anymore, I think,
Right.
for most people. So I think that's something to really think about.
And with this massive amounts of sugar, we're also seeing kids with liver disease too. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit?
Well, I haven't seen any kids in my practice with that, but I know it exists. I've seen many, many adults with it. And the first thing we do is talk about the carbohydrate content in their diet. And, that's a really fatty liver also, just as an aside, can be very connected to gut microbiome imbalances,
Mm.
dysbiosis in the gut, infections in the gut. And
Oh,
I would be willing to bet that a lot of those kids also have that going on too, because you're feeding the bad guys all the time.
Right.
And you're suppressing the good guys with inflammatory foods.
Right.
So of course there's going to be an imbalance. But the good old standard American diet with 55 to 60% of your calories from carbs never really intended that 40% of that 60 comes from Doritos.
Right.
That's just what's happened.
Yep.
So, and soda, so that's unfortunately what's happened. And those are, there's no nutritive value to those foods. There's no nutrients in there that you will benefit from. There's no satiety from those foods that you will benefit from. And so usually you're on to the next thing, and you've eaten all these calories, but you haven't gotten any quality out of it.
Right. How do you feel about the sugar substitutes that we're seeing, like monk fruit and stevia and things like that?
Well, monk fruit and stevia I'm okay with. I mean, I think they're overused, and I think they put way too much in a lot of products. It's like overkill.
Yeah.
But I tell my patients it's okay to use those, but they're still 30 plus times sweeter than sugar.
Yeah.
So when you take something with stevia, for example, I'm not exactly sure how much sweeter monk fruit is, but I know stevia is 30 times sweeter than sugar. So when you take something with stevia multiple times per day, or you're putting a lot of it in things that you make, your threshold for sweetness is always way up here.
Right.
And so then you eat something that's, a piece of fruit that should be satisfyingly sweet, and it's not, because your sweet level is 30 times higher than that.
Right.
So I'm always concerned about the frequency of use with those. I have no problem with, having a stevia drink once in a while, or even once a day. But it's the chronic consumption where people are constantly using it. I think I try to pull them off of that a little bit and just get them away from that constant sweet exposure.
Right. Because I think when we're used to, I mean, it's a lifestyle change, but it's a really it's a palate change.
Yeah.
When you're making changes like this. And if you've been used to eating sweet foods and, overly enhanced flavored foods for many years, then when you eat broccoli for the first time, it's not going to be as appealing. You're not going to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you really want to start appreciating your food, do yourself a favor and get off of all the enhanced foods for a while, and then go to these foods, and you'll be much more appreciative of their flavor.
And you'll find that you don't need as much of it either. I mean, I just had a patient today who was telling me, she's in her early 20s, and she was just telling me it's so interesting how she said, my friend asked me to go out for ice cream, and ice cream is her trigger food. She's had history of binging with it and things like that. And she said, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll go. I haven't had it in a while. And she said, for the first time in my life, I didn't finish it. And my friend said, you're not going to eat all that? And she said, I just feel like it's not as enjoyable as it used to be. And I'm so surprised. And that's because she's shifting her diet slowly over time and rebalancing her cravings. So she doesn't have these excessive cravings, and she's not eating that, enjoying that sweet like she thought she would, because it's not real food. I mean, she's the quality isn't there. So it's interesting when you start to see people report that, because of course that's how I live, because I practice what I preach. But it's like, oh yeah, when people say, wow, like I had my first soda and it was so sweet I couldn't even drink it. Yeah. Yes, this is good.
You're waking up.
Coming alive. Yes.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. So back to kind of the gut thing again. What can we do, and what kinds of shifts can we make to encourage the marketplace to start providing more things for us that are good for us, instead of chemical type foods and whatnot? Because I get a lot of people ask me, like, and we covered the list of the 15 good foods and the dirty dozen, but like, is this worth it to buy non-GMO? Is this worth it to buy organic?
Well, I do think it is. I think that at least a percentage, of what you can afford should be organic, because you are reducing your exposure to the chemicals and the pesticides, and the toxicity level is lower. But I think, I have to say, I think the demand is there, and the marketplace is starting to come alive for
Yeah,
it. I mean, the amount of options we have compared to even 5 years ago
that's
is
true.
immense. I mean, you can find coffee creamer that's dairy free with monk fruit. And I mean, there's everything out there now. I mean,
Hmm.
there's replacements for everything, I guess is what I mean. You have to
And that's
want,
hopeful. That's hopeful to I think a lot of my audience that may be changing things drastically is there's a swap for that.
yes, yes. That's what I do with a lot of my patients is talk about what they're going to trade out. I try really hard not to have people leaving here going, okay, so now I can't eat these 10 things and I don't know what to eat. You
Right,
want them to be able to go, oh, no big deal because I already know what I'm going to eat instead. And
right.
so the idea is that we do have, I was just talking to a patient about this yesterday, the amount of options we have is growing. It also can be extremely overwhelming to people that are not used to shopping in those
Yes,
sections, or
yes.
these
Or
brands are,
meal prepping.
or
That's overwhelming for people too. Like, why do I have to
yeah,
cook everything ahead of time?
yes,
Small steps.
right, right. And I always tell people, cook once, eat minimum twice. Cook once,
Yeah.
eat 2 or 3 times. Just so start with a soup and freeze half of it. Start with make your dinner and then make leftovers for make sure there's leftovers for tomorrow. But I think the food is, I mean, I'm thrilled with some of the options we have because you can buy a lot of clean alternatives, but
Yeah.
you'll pay for them. I mean,
Yes.
there is a price tag attached to that. And it's unfortunate because the quality, should be a standard as far
Hmm.
as I'm concerned, but crappy food is cheap. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how it works in this country.
Right.
Um, so, there is a price tag associated with eating this way. And so what I usually tell people about the organic GMO free is anything you can get GMO free, or excuse me, anything you can get organic that you can fit in your budget, great. But otherwise use that clean 15 dirty dozen.
Right.
When it comes to meats and animal proteins, I really encourage people to, if they can afford a grass-fed pastured, but if not, at least a hormone-free antibiotic free. And those are very, very accessible now. All the stores
Right.
have them, not just natural grocery stores. Most of the stores have them, I should say.
And
And then when it comes to
when a
things
label
like
says,
corn or soy,
sorry, when a label says natural,
mm,
though, we have to be careful of that, don't we?
yeah, that doesn't mean anything. I mean,
Right.
that could mean absolutely nothing. So
So it could say
you have to,
natural beef. So what are
right.
the words you really want to look for on a
You
label?
want to see the words, well, ideally pastured, grass-fed, grass finished is another term you'll see. Obviously, organic would be great as well. But a lot of these farms don't have the budget to get the organic certification.
That's right.
So you might not
And it takes a really
see
long
that.
time, isn't
It
that right?
does. They have to prove, that everything that animal consumes is organic. So GMO free is also a nice one because they're at least feeding the animal GMO-free grain, if it's not a
Oh,
grass-fed, animal. So you're
okay.
looking for those terms on, your eggs, for example, pastured.
Yep.
Free range is also not it's almost like in the natural category. It's not going to
Yeah.
cover a lot of benefits. But organic, pastured, grass-fed, when you're talking about meats, and hormone-free, antibiotic-free would be kind of the lowest tier that I would not, make sure you have at least that standard
Right.
there.
It's better than nothing. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And what about items like if we suspect that we have a gut problem, what could we do to kind of take action on that? What about items like kombucha and bone broth soup that we see that are so popular right now?
Mhm. Those are both, what I call functional foods, and they have some therapeutic benefits, and they can be used to support the microbiome and heal the gut. It sort of depends on what your symptoms are. So, like kombucha, for example, is a fermented food. So someone who has something called SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, which presents like IBS, just like bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, whatever, they may find that their symptoms worsen when they have things like kombucha or sauerkraut, fermented foods. Because
Ah,
they're feeding the bacteria, and if you have an overgrowth, that's not going to help. But the general person who just has a little bit of a dysbiosis and imbalance in the gut,
yeah.
those foods can be really therapeutic. Bone broth, you just want to make sure, or meat stock is actually even better for healing the gut. Bone broth is made with the actual bones, and they use an
Right.
acidic medium to draw the minerals out and the collagen out. But meat stock is even better, in my opinion, because it has
Hmm.
more restorative healing properties. And that's where you would just use like a, meat in like a Dutch oven. So
Yeah.
say a chicken in there with a
A
little
whole
bit of
chicken.
water and some vegetables. And then you eat that meat and it produces the collagen from the bone, and you cook it for about, 3 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
There's some
Okay. So there
benefit.
is some beneficial components to doing those things for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think those are some really standard things that nobody would more than likely would have a negative reaction to.
Right.
It's pretty benign. And if you did get, bloating from the kombucha, then you would know, okay, this isn't for me, and you
Right.
go back on it. And then you probably
Yeah.
need more help.
I was just going to say, and it might be time to step it up and see a professional at that
Yeah.
point.
Call me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about strict diet restrictions? There's all these diets out there, keto, paleo, and we talked about them last week on the podcast a little bit. But what happens when you just decide, what, I'm going to cut out gluten forever, and you don't necessarily know if you have a gluten intolerance? Is that good to do something like that if you don't know? And same with dairy. I think a lot of people, will say, I'm cutting this out completely. How does your body react to that? And can there be adverse effects to that?
No, I mean, I don't think anyone needs gluten or dairy. Like, in other words, you're not really
Oh,
missing
interesting.
anything from not eating gluten or not eating dairy. What we know about gluten is that it affects 100% of the population to some degree, as
Hmm.
far as inflaming the gut and disrupting the microbiome. To some
Okay.
degree, there is one. I mean, I was just at a conference a couple weeks ago and they presented a lot of information on that, which is really interesting. I did not know that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, so they say 100% of the people in the studies that they've used have proven to show some level of inflammation or gut dysbiosis after leaky gut type of symptoms after gluten exposure, whether they feel it or not. So that's
Interesting.
that's the part that you have to remember. Now, those of us who don't seem to feel any symptoms when we eat things like gluten, um, that doesn't mean it's not causing any problems in the body. It's just that what you want to do is you want to protect your gut as much as possible.
Hmm.
So healing, repair, good bacteria exposure, whether it's probiotics or just eating really good quality food, lots of good fiber and prebiotic foods
Yeah.
to help build up that microbiome. So you want a robust ecosystem. You want lots of healthy plants and trees, things low-lying, things high-lying. You want lots of different species of all these different bacteria. And you do that through a diverse diet. So I
Yeah.
have a pretty big problem with super restricted diets long term.
Yeah.
And I am always, always trying to get patients to expand their diets. When I have someone that comes into
Huh.
me and says, I've been on a low FODMAP diet for 4 years and it was helping and now it's not. And I go, ooh, 4 years on low FODMAP means you've basically not fertilized your soil in 4 years. And so how are you going to grow a robust ecosystem when you have not fertilized anything?
Right.
Because FODMAP is it's low fermentable carbohydrates, and it's a recommended, I don't know if you talked about that in your last week, but it's a diet that's
No, I
recommended
haven't.
for people who have like IBS type symptoms.
Okay.
So there's a large series of foods that you remove, and it's FODMAPS, FODMAPs, and those are basically, anyone can Google it and you'll get more information than you ever
Yeah.
wanted. And basically, those are a lot of prebiotic foods, and there are a lot of high fiber foods. So
Okay.
you feed your gut with those foods, but if they're causing problems, you probably have an overgrowth of bacteria. So it's okay to pull back, but you have to bring not necessarily all those foods back. If you say, oh, artichokes make my stomach hurt and artichokes are high fiber, you can never eat artichokes again. That's okay. But there's so many a lot of grains fall into that category, and a lot of
Ah.
starchy vegetables, and a lot of different fruits and vegetables, a lot of high fiber things like chia seeds and flax seeds. These are things that are really, really beneficial to our digestive tract. And when we take them away for long periods of time, you are missing the benefits of those.
Right.
Same thing with a grain-free diet. I think that at least if people are on a grain-free, which could be some form of paleo or keto, you need to at least be replenishing. So I am a big fan of like a high fiber keto diet. Yeah. Where you really push the fiber, you bring in the chia seeds, you bring in maybe even a fiber supplement if you're not eating enough of the vegetables to feed that gut microbiome. And it also keeps things regular for a lot of people too.
Right. Yeah.
It's definitely big loss when you do that long term. It's a big loss.
Yeah. So your philosophy is more about everything, keeping everything on your plate and not necessarily
as much as you can. I mean, if you don't, I certainly have patients that cannot tolerate certain foods or food groups, and we just kind of put them to the side. And if they want to eat that food, like for example, eggs, I had a patient this week who was able to reintroduce eggs for the first time in 6 years. We did a lot of gut work. We did a lot of immune regulation. She consumed one whole egg and she was perfectly fine. She normally gets a lot of rashes. Then she started, and what I had instructed her to do, which I would instruct most patients, is give a break in between the exposure so your immune system can recover if there's a little bit of a trigger.
Right.
And so she did that and also tolerated it, and then started eating it a little bit more frequently, and then broke out in a rash. So
interesting. So was she able to eat eggs earlier in her life and then evolved into not being able to eat eggs?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's all due to her gut biome?
I think she had been off eggs about 6 or 7 years when I started working with her, which was about a year ago. So she came for rashes and a lot of skin issues. And so of course we dig in and we find, there's a lot of imbalance in the gut, and we've been supporting the immune system, which is housed in the gut. So there's all these different, that's a good example of how it's not really what she came for, but that's what we've evolved to. And that's what's been working for her. So
wow, it's just like peeling back the layers, trying to figure out what's going on.
Detective work. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah.
Do you have any, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, do you have any great success stories that you could share? Just how, somebody came in that was just really, really struggling and has been able to come through the whole journey just with nutrition and making lifestyle changes? Yeah,
I have a lot of them actually. I think when you start to buy in, it's life-changing, buy into the quality of what you put in your body, buy into the quality of what you put on your skin, buy into the quality of the people you spend your time with and what you tell yourself in your head.
Yeah.
It all adds up and makes a difference. I have, let me think of a good one. Gosh. Well, this is a super simple one that was like really easy and awesome. But one of my favorites is when I have, you do a lot of the same things for different people. And sometimes it works on the very first time, and other times it takes, a little bit of tweaking and then also digging deeper. Right. So just a quick one, because we don't have a lot of time. Was a woman that came to me because she was having pretty severe anxiety, feeling really, really shaky and fragile was probably a good way to describe it, as far as energy and, stability, even just kind of feeling really weak during the days. She's very thin and active, and she had gained about, I think, 5 or 7 pounds, which was a lot for her, right around the middle. And she just was fatigued and tired and moving towards depression because she felt so out of herself. And so we plugged in we did some testing to find some nutrient deficiencies. We didn't do any any gut testing on her right away, but we basically changed her macronutrients, her carbohydrate, her protein, and fat ratios around significantly. So what really ended up happening is, as she got older, her hormones were shifting. She was in her mid-40s. Her hormones were shifting. Her carbohydrate tolerance was decreasing. She was always able to tolerate a fair amount of carbohydrates without any weight gain because she was very active. But suddenly it was making her blood sugar crash 3, 4, 5 times a day. And then those crashes made her feel really shaky and anxious. And so we flipped her macronutrients around. We gave her some support for blood sugar and some B vitamins. And she came back to see me once, and she was like in tears, I just feel so good. I can't believe this worked so fast. And I'm like, me too. This is great. I'm like, you're going to put me out of business here. And then,
that's super cool.
let's make an appointment just for like a couple months out. And if you feel good and you don't need it, just email me. And so she emailed me a week before and she's like, Nicole, I feel amazing. I feel the same as I have felt or better than last time. I'm exercising. That 5 pounds is totally gone. I feel like myself again. My husband's so happy. I can't thank you enough. It was like this great, we were both just like glowing, but it was boom, really, really fast. Now, of course, she was lucky, I think she had a good foundation.
Right.
A lot of other things going on in her body and not a lot of gut imbalances. When you have these layers and more going on, it's going to take longer.
Right.
That's a really quick one that was super fun to see because we had her adjust her macros, so what she ate. And then, of course, we took out sugar. We really did take out sugar because she wasn't eating a ton, but what she was eating, I think, was hitting her so hard.
Right.
And I told her, you might be able to get away with little bits of sugar, but you got to keep your blood sugar really stable. And the B vitamins will help with that because she was depleted in B vitamins. So that was part of what we gave her. But, just a quick, easy one. That was just fun.
Yeah. Well, it's possible. And that's what I want to,
so.
to convey to our listeners that, hey, it's really possible.
Yeah.
You can come out of this with so much better. It's just making lifestyle changes and changing the way you eat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So tell everyone, where can we find you?
I have a website, Enlightenment Nutrition Consulting. My website is enlightenmentnutrition.com. I am located in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I am in kind of central Fort Collins. And you can read a little bit about me. I have a lot of testimonials on my website, which is really nice to see kind of some people's experiences because I try to ask for testimonials from lots different types of patients, so people get a lot of good experiences. I do some classes as well, which I usually will post on my website or send out as emails, and I could certainly include you in those so you can share them.
Yeah, that would be great. I think specifically the ones that you're doing for the teens. I think that would really be helpful.
Series with the teen girls. We're working on a series to get a nutrition component, a mindfulness, a yoga, and then an additional kind of flex speaker that might be, a psychotherapist, or it might be a personal trainer, et cetera. Somebody who's really kind of going to give them a different perspective on things. So that's to be coming probably in the new year. And then on October 10th, I have a group cleanse that I'm doing, which is open to anyone, and it's a free class that is below my office in the Proactive PT, which is downstairs, and they have that class is free, and then if you choose to do the cleanse, you obviously buy the supplies, but it's a program that is food-based cleanse, so it's just really cleaning up your diet. It's an 18-day program, and I like to do group stuff because I feel like people really need support.
Yeah, that's exactly why we have the Naturally Inspired podcast, because this is a community for people to plug into, get information, kind of find what they think would suit them best, and then get started on a new path.
Yes, absolutely. There's always hope. I tell people every day, never give up on yourself. Trust your body. Know that your body can heal. And if you don't feel well, you should not be compromising your quality of life. You can feel better. You just have to get that motivation to make the first step, whether that's just a few changes in your diet or whether that's going to see a practitioner or something in between. But, don't give up and don't accept, mediocrity for just surviving in life. You should be thriving. There's so many wonderful things about this life. Let's enjoy it.
That's said so perfectly, Nicole. Thank you so much for being on today.
You're so welcome. Thanks so much.
If the Naturally Inspired movement makes sense to you, let's do this together and transform the medical model and help people take charge of their health. Learn more about how you can join the Naturally Inspired movement by going to naturallyinspiredadvocate.com or call me at 970-475-4862.